Shopify is a platform built for growth, whether you're just starting out or already running a thriving business. From managing inventory to creating a seamless checkout experience, Shopify is designed to handle it all. And it doesn't stop there. Shopify helps you sell everywhere your customers are, online or in person. It's the ultimate tool for turning big dreams into big wins. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/OPP.
Mochi Health is here to help you start your weight loss journey with caring, personalized support. Meet one-on-one with board-certified obesity doctors and registered dietitians who truly listen and understand your unique needs. Eligible patients can access affordable GLP-1 medications delivered right to their door each month. No insurance? No problem. Mochi Health accepts FSA and HSA, making care accessible and affordable. And with 24/7 customer service, you'll never feel alone on your path to better health. Get started with Mochi Health today. Take the free quiz at joinmochi.com and use code AUDIO40 at checkout for $40 off your first month of membership. That's joinmochi.com with promo code AUDIO40.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on The Prosecutors, we continue our investigation into the mysterious disappearance of Maura Murray. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Prosecutors. Thank you all for joining us wherever you are. Today, we're going to continue our investigation into the disappearance of Maura Murray. This is day 3. I have a feeling we'll be going into day 4, but we'll see how it goes. I'm Brett, and I'm joined today, as always, by my co-host, Alice.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back.
Hello, Alice. It's good to be back with you again. Alice and I haven't recorded much lately. We've been so busy with work. We spent one entire day on the phone interviewing witnesses, which was one of the worst experiences. I don't know. Alice did more talking than I did, so she probably can speak to that.
It was not a pleasant experience. If you think it's hard, I kind of felt like I was a telemarketer and trying to convince people not to hang up on me.
Yeah, the best part is trying to convince people that you're not running a scam. I mean, I get these calls all the time where it's like, I'm an IRS investigator, and unless you give us your bank account, we're going to come arrest you or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
So I appreciated people's skepticism. But we are still recording from our separate locations. I went out today for lunch to pick up lunch, and it seemed like there were a lot of people out there. So I don't know how much longer this is going to last. Maybe officially it might last longer, but it seems like people are starting to make their way back out into the world. So who knows, Alice? Maybe we'll be together soon.
Perhaps. But, as things open up, I think things will get busier too. So it's kind of been nice being in our, isolation pods.
It's true. It's true. And, I don't think it sounds that bad. We'll see what the audience thinks. But in any event, as I said earlier, this is day 3 of our investigation. In the first couple days, we talked a little bit about the background of the accident, which we're going to get into fully today. We talked about Maura's history, talked about her time at West Point and her time at Amherst. And then we talked about the run-up to the day she disappeared and some of the things that happened to her that day. And today we're really getting into the nitty-gritty. We're going to talk about this accident and trying to, I don't know that we even have to explain to you why it's so strange. I think you'll just see it from the facts. So let's get started. So as we said earlier, at this point, Maura has stopped at an ATM. She's got $280 out of it, which is basically all her money. She spends some of that money on various alcohols, including a box of wine. At this point, she heads north, apparently to the White Mountains. At around 7:25 on the evening of February 9th, 2004, Maura she's on one of these winding back roads, one of these mountain roads, Route 112, and she comes around a sharp curve on that road. It's now called the Wild Amunasuk Road.
I thought that was a pretty good shot.
Yeah,
Maybe Amanasuk?
Amunasuk is probably much closer. Mine sounds like it's Egyptian, which I don't think is right. Amunasuk. How about we just say Route 112? This is why they give roads numbers, especially in a place like Massachusetts, which has a lot of terrific names.
That's fair. I thought we did a pretty good stab at it.
I did. It was a good stab. She's just outside of Haverhill, not Haverhill. Haverhill. I do know how to pronounce that. And she's driving her car. She goes around this curve. It's a pretty sharp curve, and she runs off the road into a snowbank. She's going fast enough that when she hits the snowbank or when she hits a tree, it's a little unclear. Some people think she hits some bushes. Whatever she hits, the accident actually deploys the airbags, and the car spins around so that it's now facing westward in the eastbound lane. So basically, it's facing the way that she was coming from. I got to tell you, I don't know exactly how fast you have to be going in a Saturn to deploy the airbags when you get into a wreck. One time I was in my last car, which was a Ford Explorer, and we were driving down the interstate. We were actually coming back from Massachusetts, and it had snowed the night before, but it was a beautiful, clear day. Everything seemed fine. We're going down the interstate at like interstate speeds, and we hit some ice. And so we start just sliding all over the interstate, and we're going left like we're going to go into the median, and then back like we're going to go off the side. And we do this for what seemed like an eternity. And finally, we actually go off the side of the road, down, and hit a snowbank, and then hit a barbed wire fence. And the barbed wire fence like catches us and stops us. And going that fast off that hill did not deploy the airbags. So I got to think Maura was going pretty fast. I don't know if you've had any experience, Alice, with airbags or not.
Well, I've actually been hit by an 18-wheeler, and I remember spinning across the median. So it was like a pretty bad wreck.
Wow.
And my airbags did not deploy. So, and I don't think my airbags were faulty.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, some people speculate that Maura couldn't have been going that fast because of the roads and the conditions. And ordinarily, I would agree. But the fact that the airbags did deploy says something to me. Now, some people speculate that she was involved in a wreck earlier and maybe the airbags deployed then. You can drive a car. A lot of people think you can't drive a car after the airbags deploy. You actually can. Some people speculate that maybe they deployed when she hit Patrick Vassy the night where she had the catatonic event. But in any event, at some point the airbags deploy and she comes to a stop. Now, where she has this wreck, number one, I want you to visualize these roads. I've driven on these roads. If you've been up in New Hampshire, it's dark. There are not many street lights. This night in particular, there was no moon, so there's not even moonlight. It's 7:30 at night in February in New England. It's dark. I mean, it gets dark in New England around 4:30. It's already getting dark. So by this point, it would have been pretty dark. But people hear the accident, and there are people who live around where this accident occurred. So it's a pretty rural area, but there's a couple houses just in this area. In fact, there's a barn, there's like a store. It's called like the Big Red Barn or something like that. That's just down from where this accident happened. And the folks who own that barn live near the barn, so they could see the accident. There was another group of people who could see the accident. In any event, this accident happens around 7:25. At 7:27, a woman who actually lives across the street from where the accident happened, a Faith Westman, she calls the police. She calls 911. And she says, hey, there's been an accident. You need to send somebody. There's some other things she may have said. which we'll get into a little bit later. But in any event, she's called this in. So 7:25, this accident happens. 7:27, Faith Westman calls in the accident. 1 minute later, an officer named Cecil Smith is deployed to the scene, and he's coming from the west. So a couple minutes after Faith Westman makes this call, a local school bus driver actually drives up in his school bus. He lives right near where the accident happened, and in order to get to his home, he has to pass it. So he drives up in his school bus. His name is Butch Atwood. He stops, he leans out, he asks Maura if she needs him to call the police. And the way he describes this is, I think at this point, her car is flipped around, so she's out of her car, out of the driver's side of her car, and she's sort of talking to him across the car and into his school bus. And so she asks him if she needed him to call the police. Now, she tells him no, it's fine. She's already called AAA, and they're on their way. Now, the interesting thing about this is Butch immediately knows that she's lying. And he knows that because there's no cell service in the area. Apparently, there's not cell service there to this day. So there certainly wasn't at the time, and the people who lived there knew that. Now, you get conflicting reports about this conversation. Some people will say that Maura, quote unquote, begged him not to call the police. I think the more likely sort of spin to put on it is it's don't worry about it. I'm okay. I've already called AAA. They're on their way. So more try and put him at ease.
And maybe Butch recognizes that it's pitch black outside. He's a guy and she's a young woman, and he may not have wanted to scare her. He is driving a school bus, so maybe it's not that intimidating. But I could imagine, being in his shoes and not wanting to kind of push it and be accused of, scaring a young woman later on or something like that. So maybe he was just backing off.
I think Butch even says later on that he's not surprised that Maura didn't necessarily trust him immediately. He was kind of a big guy. Like you said, it's the middle of nowhere. It's dark. Butch Atwood driving the school bus is probably not a serial killer, but you never know, right?
But you never know. Putting myself in that situation, the Northeast at 7:30 in the wintertime is kind of a scary time, especially if it's snowing. I probably would just think, I'll wait it out, or I'll figure something out. I'd rather not be the victim of some axe murder tragedy.
Right. And frankly, that way of looking at it, we're going to have to talk about that in a few minutes when we get, or eventually, I don't know if we'll talk about it today, but when we get into theories of what might have happened. What would a young woman in this area do if approached by random people in a car? Now, we have Butch Atwood and her response to him. Now, the thing is, one thing Butch is not offering her is escape, right? He's not saying, hey, jump in my school bus. I will drive you down to the next town where there is cell service, and then you can call somebody. He's just offering to call the police for her. So, depending on Maura's state and whether or not she wants the police to come, the fact that she turns down Butch Atwood doesn't necessarily mean that she would turn down the next car that came down the road. In any event, she does turn him down, and he leaves. He parks his bus, and he decides he's going to call 911 because he knows she doesn't actually have AAA. He assumes she's probably just scared and she needs help. So Butch Atwood also puts in a call to 911. So over the course of the next few minutes, you have what I think, James Renner describes, and I think this is such an evocative way to describe it, as a sort of lighthouse, where there are three lighthouses. There's the Atwood lighthouse. There's the Westman lighthouse. There's another family who also lives nearby who has also noticed that this accident's happening, and their lighthouse. And every now and then, over the next few minutes, they're doing what anybody would do. You've just had an accident. It's outside. The flashers are on. You're waiting for the police to arrive. Every now and then, you're looking out there. And when they look out there, they're sort of shining their light on the accident. Westman, in particular, I think she actually calls 911 again just to make sure somebody's coming. One thing she says, which has become very controversial and much discussed, is she tells the 911 operator that she can see a man sitting in the passenger side smoking a cigarette. Subsequently, she changed that to say she didn't know if it was a man and it could have been a cell phone light. So the most innocuous explanation of this is she sees Maura with her cell phone trying to call somebody. But obviously, the fact that she said she saw a man smoking a cigarette has sparked a lot of people's imaginations over the years. The other thing that she says is at some point she sees Maura around her trunk. She calls it a flurry of activity. So we can assume that Maura has gone to the trunk, she's opened it up, and she's doing something back there.
Yeah, you just noted about the passenger side seat being, at first seeming like she saw someone and then not. But again, we have to remember it's pretty pitch black. And when you said that they're like a lighthouse shining light on it, that's not literal. There's probably very little ambient light because of the rural nature of where this road is. So I do wonder, how much her observations can be trusted.
And another interesting thing is because the car has spun around, she may even be thinking of the seat farthest away from her as being the passenger seat, when in fact it's really the driver's seat because of the way the car spun around. But I think you're right. I think picking apart exactly what people said and what people thought in that moment just isn't very helpful. There's no other evidence that there was someone else there. There's no other evidence that there was someone else in the car. Butch Atwood, who saw Maura up close, didn't see anyone else in the car. And, a lot of conspiracy theories come out of this. And it's actually pretty common when you have conspiracy theories and you look at the way conspiracy theories develop, people focus intensely on the things that are said that don't make sense. So you see this in 9/11 conspiracies, for instance. So, you got the most chaotic event in history, since Pearl Harbor. And you've got firefighters who are talking to each other over the end of the phones and over their walkie-talkies and trying to direct people to all these various buildings that are on fire. And people will say things like, he said they were sending them to building 8 and there were no firefighters in building 8. And that's proof that this was all a conspiracy. And in reality, it's just the chaos of the situation. And I think you have a similar thing here. Faith Westman's doing the best she can. She has no idea what's going on down there. She thinks she sees a cigarette. She realizes later on it's not one. Atwood is up on his porch. He's trying to see what's going on. He can't really see Maura's car from his position. Now, we have a contradiction here. He says that several cars passed during this time, and Faith Westman says she doesn't remember any cars passing by. So, once again, you have that lighthouse effect. Who knows? If Butch Atwood says cars passed, cars probably passed.
And I'm trying to think, when I've definitely noticed things if I'm getting home and getting dinner ready or eating dinner or, puttering around the house after a long day of work, I can't really remember what I see. I may keep looking out the window. I'm just saying this is probably, at the time of day, everyone is probably busy. It's dinner time, end of the day sort of thing.
And it's a thing you're not going to realize is important in the moment, right? I mean, you got a minor fender bender out here in front of your house. You don't think you're witnessing history. So you're not necessarily paying attention to whether or not a car is going by. And if somebody asks you later on, hey, did you see any cars go by? You may think, well, I was looking out there for a good long time. Surely something passed by, right? And then you say that, and maybe you saw something, maybe you didn't. And the same thing with Faith Westman. When she's asked later on, did you see any cars? She doesn't remember seeing any cars, but a car could have driven by and she didn't even notice it.
And we see this from witnesses all the time when they don't remember something, especially when we're asking them a question that we kind of know the answer to. And the answer should be, they would not know. They try to make an answer. So they may think, well, most nights cars come by. It's not like we live in the middle of nowhere. At least a couple cars pass by each night. I don't remember specifically that night, but I would say most nights cars pass by. So yeah, sure, cars pass by that night. Or I don't see cars.
Yeah, the subconscious mind and the way it works with witnesses there's a reason that you have to take what people say with a grain of salt, where you're asking if you know somebody or if you've ever heard of somebody. And we have every reason to think these people have never seen that person before or heard of that person in their life. And they say things like, oh, that sounds familiar. I may have heard of him, but I've never met him. Right? And that's a very rational thing to do when you're asked if you've met somebody. You assume, well, I probably did, but I don't remember it. But, you're trying to be helpful. And that's another thing. All these people are, innocent as the day is long. They didn't do anything wrong. They want to be helpful. They want to help the police find this girl. They're going to rack their brains and do the best they can. And it's not always going to be accurate. Okay. So remember, I just want to emphasize this point. It's 7:25. Maura runs into a snowbank. 7:27, 911 call. 1 minute later, Cecil Smith heads that way. 2 minutes later, Butch Atwood arrives, has a very short conversation with Maura, and leaves. At around 7:35, 10 minutes after the wreck happened, Cecil Smith, the officer who has been deployed, arrives on the scene, and Maura is nowhere to be seen. And she's never seen again. 10 minutes after the accident. A handful of minutes where she could have disappeared, and yet somehow it happens.
So what we do have left behind is her wrecked car. We know that it's been wrecked and it doesn't start. The windshield's broken just above the driver's side. So it's possible, based on the placement of where it broke, that Maura's head actually hit the windshield.
And we now know from the black box, which has been looked at, and I wish we had this report. We don't. Maura's family apparently has this report. If you want to hear an in-depth discussion of it, you have to go to Aaron Larkin's podcast where they talk about it because they actually have a copy of the report. But apparently from the report, the police are fairly certain that Maura was not wearing her seatbelt when this wreck occurred.
I didn't know you could know that from a black box.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those, now if you don't do your seatbelt, it dings at you. So I guess it's also making a record in your, computer, your car's little computer.
Man, Big Brother is everywhere.
Exactly. Everywhere.
Well, I didn't even know that part, man.
And this was a 96, 97
Yeah.
Saturn. Who knows what they know about you now?
No kidding. Okay, well, good to know. I learned something new today. So apparently, her car knew that she wasn't wearing a seatbelt. But we know that the wreck was so bad that her airbags actually deployed. And we say it's so bad because, as Brett and I were just talking about, we've both been in accidents, pretty bad accidents, in fact, where our airbags did not deploy. So of course, we don't know if the airbags deployed at that particular accident or at a previous time. But when Smith found the car, the airbag was already deployed.
And one other thing about that, the windshield, some people who've looked at this who are car wreck experts say that the way the windshield was broken is not indicative of Maura's head having struck the windshield, but that in fact, and I didn't know this, when airbags deploy in those kind of vehicles, it often shatters the windshield in exactly that kind of pattern. So there are wreck experts who say that is actually because of the airbags deploying.
And kind of with that, though, I've always heard that airbags can cause sometimes more damage to you than the accident otherwise would. So even if her head didn't hit the windshield, it's very possible that she had hit her head or had some other kind of injury from the airbag deploying.
Alice, when you had your wreck, if you don't mind talking about it, were you injured in it?
I shockingly wasn't. So this was one of the summers, I think right before my last year of law school. I was actually driving from Georgia to Alabama, and right as I crossed the state line, so it's a relatively rural part, like mostly it's a 2-lane highway, and you have 18-wheelers transporting, goods. Like I saw a lot of Walmart boxcars, basically. And an 18-wheeler pulled out of a rest stop, and it's a short merge onto the 2-lane highway, so there's not really anywhere to go. In other words, there is 2 lanes going one direction, and then a median, and then 2 lanes going the other direction. And he just merged. He just completely got over without looking, and sideswiped me. But he was so large compared to me that he hit the front part of my car, and that's what sent me spinning. So I went spinning like a top. Like, I don't know how many times I spun, but it was several times, because I spun across the median, and I know it was bad because basically everyone behind me, it was a hit and run, by the way. The boxcar kept going and never stopped. I know it was bad because everyone behind me stopped. So I had maybe 6 or 7 cars stop because they all thought I was dead.
Wow.
But shockingly, I was not hurt. But also my airbag didn't deploy, and I was wearing a seatbelt.
But I bet even though you weren't hurt, you were probably pretty shaken up by that.
Oh, there was no way I could drive. My whole body was shaking from the adrenaline and fear, everything. And I couldn't even get out of the car because I didn't know if anything was broken. And I think I sat in the car with, a good Samaritan talking to me through the window for about 15 to 20 minutes. And then when the police showed up, I stayed in my car for another, I think, 10 minutes because I was just too scared to move. So I really couldn't move. My legs felt like jelly. And I remember thinking, I think I'm alive, but I couldn't will my body to move. I remember that part.
The first big accident I was in, it actually totaled my Camry, may it rest in peace, was a 16-year-old driver who had just gotten his truck back after being in a previous wreck, ran a stop sign, and hit me in the driver's side door. And basically, he was going pretty fast, but he hits me in the driver's side door and pushes me, across several lanes of traffic into another stop sign. And it was a rough wreck. But like you, somehow I wasn't injured. I actually watched him do this through my driver's side door. I'm just lucky that the glass didn't shatter and slice up my face. But anyway, I remember getting out of the car, and I had to crawl out, through the passenger side. And I remember getting out of the car and thinking, I was fine. And then the police officer came, and he was asking me questions about what happened. And I could not put together sentences. I could not think straight about this. And I had no physical injuries whatsoever, but I could not respond to his answers or as to his questions. And I remember the mother of this kid had come, and she said something like, "Oh my goodness, he's in shock." And I was like, "I'm not in shock," but
no, that's a really good point. I felt scrambled.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way to put it, scrambled. And so one of the things that's always been remarkable to me about this entire incident is that Maura, in this very short period of time, she may have been scrambled and not thinking clearly, and I think that is obviously the case. But she gets out of the car, and she's got herself together enough to lie to Butch Atwood, and she's already, getting stuff together in the trunk. And this is literally in the 10 minutes after this wreck. And I just don't know how she did that, because I would think this would shake her up pretty good. Unless
you were planning a wreck. And it was just coming.
There you go. Now we're down conspiracy lane.
I thought you set that up for me to set Spike.
Oh man, people are gonna hate us.
Okay, before we go down that rabbit hole, so all that to say was, her airbags were deployed. Now this is kind of strange though. There was a rag that came from Maura's trunk that was stuffed into the tailpipe of Maura's car. Do you know why you would stuff a tailpipe with a rag? Is there a reason to do that?
This is one of those facts that a lot of podcasts that don't really delve too deeply into this case. If you do one episode on Maura Murray, you make this seem like it's this huge mystery, right? There was a rag in her tailpipe. And usually they don't even mention that it came from her trunk. But we do have some idea about why she did this, and she did it, is the first thing. Some people have speculated that, she stopped to get gas. We know that her gas tank was pretty full, maybe almost completely full, frankly, 7/8 full. Now in a Saturn, you get pretty good gas mileage. So she could have gone a ways on that much gas, but nonetheless, it was pretty full. So she had stopped relatively recently. So some people will speculate, oh, somebody stuffed the rag in her tailpipe to make her car stop, so they could kidnap her. And so probably she didn't really lose control. They just stopped the car and then they got her. The problem is, number one, the rag did come from her own trunk. Number two, her father has said that her car was so bad that it essentially, it was one of those cars that smokes really bad. Every now and then you get behind one of these cars where smoke is just pouring out of the tailpipe. And he had told her, if you're ever worried you're going to get stopped by the police, which you will be in Massachusetts for that kind of thing, you can put a rag in the tailpipe and that'll keep the smoke from coming out long enough for you to sort of get down the road away from where the police are. So that's what people speculate she did. I think there's another possibility that she wrecks the car spins around, she tries to start the car, it won't start because of the wreck, and she thinks sort of irrationally, well, maybe if I put this, rag in the tailpipe, it'll fix what's ever wrong and the car will start. I mean, who knows why she did it? It's hard to believe she did it back at a gas station and it was still in there, because it probably would just be blown out of the end of the car. People have done tests on this and say that it comes out of the car fairly quickly. So I think it's possible that when she's digging around in the trunk, one of the things she's doing is she's getting this rag to see if she can get the car to start. I say this based on, I had a stupid experience once where when I was in high school and my car stopped and it was like smoking a little bit when it stopped. So my friends and I decided, well, maybe it's just low on coolant. And if we just put some coolant in it, it'll start, sort of magical thinking. And we got the coolant, we put it in there and it didn't start, obviously. So I kind of wonder if maybe she was having similar magical thinking where her dad had told her, hey, if you have a problem, put the rag in the tailpipe and see what happens. But in any event, wherever she did it, it doesn't seem like it's actually as nefarious as some people try to make it out to be.
I think it's weird.
I mean, it's totally weird. It's totally weird. But the fact it came from her trunk and her father was able to identify it as coming from her trunk, I don't really know how her father was able to do that.
That's a fair point. Like, I have a lot of, random crap in my trunk, and I'm not sure my father, who I don't live with, I know she recently saw him, but, that someone would be able to identify one of the many random pieces of junk I have in my car.
Yeah, I think her father was very involved in the care for this car and maybe have even given her this rag for specifically this purpose. I don't know why he would lie about this. He's always been very adamant that he knows what that rag is. And look, his position is someone murdered her. I mean, that is what he says happened. He thinks a quote unquote local dirtbag found her and killed her. So he doesn't really have a reason not to believe that the rag is nefarious, but he's always taken the position that it's not.
All right. So remember that black box who knows everything that we talked about earlier? What we do know from the black box as well is that the car was attempted to be started 7 times since the wreck. Now, that's not to say that Maura necessarily tried to start the car 7 times, because we know later on, I think investigators were trying to see if the car would start. So others may have started the car since the wreck, but we know that there were 7 instances in which the car, someone tried to start the car and it, of course, did not start.
And this is another reason I wish we could see that black box report. And if somebody's got it, send it our way. I could not find it online and I looked pretty hard. If she did try and start her car again, I actually think that's significant. Just because, why would you do that? I mean, you've been in a wreck bad enough to shatter your windshield and deploy your airbags. I would think you just wait for help. So if she didn't just wait for help, if she tried to start her car, that means she's trying to drive away from this accident. And it's hard for me to think of a reason that she would do that doesn't speak to her state of mind that night.
So remember, she had all that alcohol that she got before she took off. So Sergeant Smith did find a box of Franzia wine behind the driver's seat of the vehicle and a red liquid on the driver's side door and the ceiling of the car. That red liquid may have been the Franzia box of wine probably was. And what we know from Maura's high school friend, Liz Druniak.
I think it's Druniak.
Help me out here. Just leaving me out to dry here.
I think it's Liz Druniak.
Druniak. That sounds much better. So, we never said that we were like, pronunciation kings and queens here.
No, and I think we've proved that over the course of these 2
I think
episodes.
we have proved that in a very short amount of time. So, we know from her friend Liz that Maura is not a heavy drinker, but she did like to buy wine by the box, which kind of seems to contradict each other.
Yeah, I think Liz might be being a little kind to Maura here, but I mean, people buy wine by the box, and doesn't mean they're alcoholics or whatever. But I do think the next little bit that we learn does say something about Maura.
Right. So the Franzia box of wine was damaged, maybe from the accident. I guess that is possible since it was in the car. But there were reddish spots resembling wine were also found on the road, which according to investigator John Healy, and later on, Sergeant Smith discovered a Coke bottle that contained what he said, quote, a red liquid with a strong alcoholic odor. So in other words, he thinks he found a Coke bottle with the Franzia wine in it. Like if you're not, I don't know your experience, but I would say in college, people often put alcohol into soda bottles to disguise that they were drinking alcohol so that they could drink more.
All the time.
Right. Or if you wanted to drink when you're driving, that's another way to do it. Because if you're pulled over, it looks like a bottle of Coke instead of a bottle of Franzia. So that definitely cuts against her not being a drinker, because that's certainly risky behavior.
Let's just talk about this for a second, because this is one of those things that has become controversial stupidly, in my view. I said we weren't going to spend this whole podcast talking about Aaron Larkin and James Renner, but I feel like we keep coming back to them because they're so present all the time. So Aaron Larkin, I mean, she's very defensive of Maura, and I get that. But one of her crusades is to prove that Maura wasn't drinking that night. And she's got all these theories about this, that she had kept, coolant. She had kept antifreeze in a Coke bottle in case she needed it later on. And that's what it is. And that's why it smells like alcohol, because it has alcohol in it. I mean, come on.
Is coolant red, though?
So she's looked into this and has discovered that, yes, they did use red coolant in Saturns at that time. So this is part of her proof that this is really coolant.
But I feel like those sorts of things really cuts against our first principle,
Yes,
Occam's razor.
exactly.
Which is like you're doing all of these hoops and twists and turns when it's like, this lady had a lot of alcohol in her car. Like,
Right, exactly.
she did.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to drink. Now, you shouldn't be drinking and driving, obviously, but I mean, look, maybe she's just sipping it as she's driving. It's Franzia wine. You'd have to drink the whole box, I think, for it to have any significant effect on you.
You'd have to drink a lot of Franzia wine.
Yeah,
There's
but
probably
I
none
think
left over to be splattered on the ceiling.
It is probably the case that and another thing that Erin points out, and I don't even understand why she points this out. She claims that there's no way the wreck could have damaged the wine box enough for the wine to leak into the car. She's probably right about that. It probably was damaged, but not burst. The wine came from the Coke bottle. She had the Coke bottle. It was open. She got in a wreck.
She was drinking it.
And it went everywhere. I mean, it's not hard to figure this out. And frankly, this speaks a lot to why Maura probably didn't want Butch Atwood to call the police, because even if she's not drunk, the fact that she's been drinking, the police officer is going to know that, and it's going to get her into more trouble.
And here's the thing. If alcohol is on the passenger's or the driver's side, ceiling and door, it's probably on Maura.
Right.
And so if someone were talking to her, like a police officer, I mean, they were talking to her, they probably would notice and smell wine on her if in fact it had spilled everywhere.
Right. And Erin, in her podcast, talks about the fact that Smith wasn't a drinker. So how does he know what alcohol even smells like? And it's like,
He's a police officer.
cop.
Of course he would know what alcohol. Okay, so here's the thing. I too, I was kind of a goody two shoes. I didn't drink before I was 21, even though I went to a college that was very much a party school. So I had never tasted alcohol before 21. But let me tell you, I knew very well what alcohol smelled like.
Right. It's not like it's a subtle scent. And
No.
It's not like, your local cop in a place like Haverhill, New Hampshire. It's not like he's investigating a lot of murders. He's dealing with a lot of drunken disorderly and drunk drivers and drunken public and DUIs. He knows what alcohol smells like. And if he says that he smelled alcohol, he smelled alcohol.
So we don't actually know the state. And the one person who did talk to Maura, Atwood, said that he did not think Maura was intoxicated when he spoke to her. Now, who knows? Because again, I'm not usually thinking with every person I speak to, are you intoxicated? Are you intoxicated? Are you intoxicated? In fact, oftentimes, I will have, say, a witness interview, or just in my daily life, I'll talk to someone who seems off, and I'll just write them off as being a little bit eccentric, or just, everyone's a little bit different and they don't have to necessarily act a certain way. And it isn't until later I find out that they actually have major mental issues or they were under the influence. Because sometimes it is subtle enough where I try to give the benefit of the doubt to the person. My first thought is not this person is, having a psychotic break or drunk or under the influence or some other thing like that.
And let's just a couple things on this. Number one, it doesn't matter if she was intoxicated. I mean, I guess it matters, but if she were drinking but not intoxicated, she has the same incentives to avoid the police as if she was dropped down drunk. If the police show up to a wreck and they smell alcohol in your breath, you got a problem. And you got a problem even if you're not over the legal limit. Most people don't know this, but DUI and DWI, often in a lot of states, including, I believe, New Hampshire, are different. One is driving while intoxicated. That's if you're .08 or over. If you're under .08, but you register some alcohol, the police can still cite you if there's evidence that your driving has been affected. So she didn't have to be drunk for this to matter. That's the first thing. The second thing, she'd just been in a car wreck. Even if she were drunk, the adrenaline and everything else, she probably sobered up pretty fast. If you've ever been at a party when you were under 21 and the cops showed up, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, you are sober very quickly. And I think that's probably what happened here. She probably had not had that much to drink. She wasn't dropped, fall over drunk, number one. And number two, she's just been in a wreck. It's a pretty violent one. She's going to have sobered up pretty quickly. So I don't actually think what Butch Atwood said is that significant, other than she wasn't like, 0.2 or something. She wasn't so drunk that she couldn't even walk.
Right. So investigators found other things in her car as well, besides this Franzia. They also found her textbooks. Remember, she's a nursing student. The accident forms, presumably the ones that her dad asked her to pick up after he had wrecked his car previously. And then directions to locations in New Hampshire and Vermont. Remember, she had called both places. And back in this time, I remember in college, I still printed out MapQuest, directions. So
I think that's exactly what these are.
yeah, that's certainly what I did. And then there was also a copy of the book Not Without Peril, which I have not read before.
So a couple things. Not Without Peril is actually one of Maura's favorite books. It's a book about the White Mountains, and it includes people getting into trouble in the White Mountains and sort of like how they got out of that trouble. I don't think it's that significant, though people sort of point to the irony of her going to the White Mountains and getting into trouble in the White Mountains and having this book. Going back to the textbooks, this goes back to what we were talking about a couple times ago about this phone call and the scrubs and the homework. I looked into that a little bit more, by the way, and she definitely returned some nursing scrubs. There's no question about that. Whether that call was about that or was about homework assignments is not entirely clear. But one thing that is clear is she had taken her textbooks with her on this trip. So I don't know about you, but if I was going up there to kill myself or, driving to Canada never to return, the last thing I would take with me are my textbooks. So I think that tells you something. And I think it also tells you something. And the way this is always put, and obviously we haven't seen these documents, it's always put as directions to places in both New Hampshire and Vermont, which I think goes back to this notion she's going, but it's not entirely clear where she's going. And I don't think she even necessarily knew where she was going to end up.
Right. And, like you said, she also took things of significance to her because she also had brought with her, but it was left in the car, one of her favorite stuffed animals that she had named Joseph the monkey. This is kind of something that she took with her every time she took a trip. Joseph the monkey was a present from her boyfriend, Billy. Joseph was Billy's middle name, so she named the monkey after him. And I guess she had a thing for monkeys because she also had another monkey stuffed animal that she had named Harry, but that one was left at the dorm. Read what you want into that, except that I think Joseph always went with her on trips, so it makes sense for him to go on this trip. But I guess it's a little strange if she were trying to run away because he is left in the car. So she thought enough to bring him into the car, but if she were going to be running off by foot, she did not take Joseph.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about this more, I guess, but I think it's indicative of her intention to return to that car at some point.
Yeah. If not for the Franzia, then for Joseph.
Exactly. Well, but even though she had to leave the Franzia behind, she did not leave without something to get her through the night.
So, right. So, there's only the Franzia, but in fact, there's a receipt from the liquor store that shows she also bought Bailey's, Kahlua, vodka, as well as the wine that day. So she took with her the Bailey's, Kahlua, and vodka, but not the Franzia box of wine. And her backpack was also missing, as were her cell phone, her driver's license, and credit cards. So she took basically, I would say, the things that I always take when I go anywhere. My cell phone, my wallet, and in this case, her hard liquor.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, basically, at some point, it seems like she grabbed her backpack. She threw, everything you need to make a Black Russian into the backpack, along with, the things she really needs, and heads out somewhere.
Here's my one thought about the Franzia, though. I bet it sounds like she probably would have taken the Franzia if she could have, but I don't know if you've seen a box of Franzia. It's bulky because it's a cardboard box. It doesn't fit into a backpack very well, especially if you have other things in it. Whereas your Bailey's, your Kahlua, your vodka, they're bottles, so they can kind of clink next to each other. So my thought is it's not something special about the wine, except for the fact that it's kind of too bulky to fit with the rest of the things that she has in her backpack. And, like we were saying, if it may not be that she plans on drinking all this alcohol, but if you just had an accident and if you were drinking, or at least you have alcohol in the car and you're scared about getting in trouble, you'd probably want to remove the alcohol or as much of it as you could.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
So as not to get in trouble.
That's a definite possibility.
Obviously, Sergeant Smith arrives, does not see Maura, but does find the car, and they can't find her anywhere. So the police actually drive around the area for a while, but they see no trace of Maura. They even use search dogs who were able to follow her scent to about 100 yards from where the crash occurred. And 100 yards is not very far, by the way, before they lost the scent. That's it. I mean, she literally disappeared, her scent and everything else, within 100 yards of the crash. And as you can imagine, this caught a lot of attention. So there was searching going on for weeks, months, and now years for her all around that area. And there has been absolutely no trace of Maura since that night.
Yeah, it's insane to think about that someone could just disappear off the face of the earth in such a short period of time. People argue about the timeline. We'll talk about the timeline in a second, but I don't care what your timeline is. Somehow that night, Maura Murray vanished into the ether without leaving any trace, and no one has found any trace of her since. Potentially not as rare as you think. It's actually kind of shocking how many people vanish without a trace in this country every year. But to do it like this quickly, in a place like Haverhill, New Hampshire, of all places, is remarkable. And, just to return to the timeline, like we said earlier, 7:25, wreck, 7:35, Cecil Smith arrives. Now, even if nothing happened in between those, that's 10 minutes in which Maura Murray manages to vanish off the face of the world. But we know that Butch Atwood saw her around 7:30. And Butch Atwood says this was a pretty short conversation. But, assume it lasted a minute. Assume 7:31 he drives off. That's only 4 minutes. In 4 minutes, Maura managed to vanish, and no one has seen her since. One thing people like to point to who disagree with this timeline, and we might as well just go ahead and talk about this now. So there is this conspiracy theory that the police killed Maura Murray. And the theory is based almost entirely on a woman named, well, I forget her name, but she's always called Witness A. We now know who she is, but for forever she was called Witness A, who reported that she drove by the scene of the accident at around 7:37, 7:38, and saw the police vehicle nose to nose with Maura's car. And she didn't see Maura, and she didn't see the police. And then she drove off, right? Well, the log for Cecil Smith says that he called in the accident scene at 7:46. So, if Witness A is telling the truth, and we have every reason to think she was, she saw a police car there before Cecil Smith arrived. And this has led to endless speculation that another police officer arrived first, that police officer kidnapped Maura, disappeared with her, and, the cover-up was on.
I don't know about you, but it's usually kidnappers don't let you load up your good alcohol into your backpack and take your wallet and cell phone.
What's amazing about I'm so glad you made that point, and we did not discuss this beforehand because we rarely have it. Point.
There's too many theories to talk about. That's why.
I've never seen anyone make that point, and every time somebody makes this argument, I'm just like, so you're telling me? I mean, so what? One of two things happened. Either Maura thought, "Oh, the police are here. Let me grab my alcohol and go with them." Right. That's not what happened. Or the police,
or the kidnapper says, "Hey, why don't you take your identification so that if you're found, people know who you are?"
Yeah, like the whole
or your cell phone so we can track you.
But before I get ahead of myself, let me just return to this 746 theme because it's so obvious what happened here. Cecil Smith shows up. Now, look, we all know, we've all seen, live PD. We know that when the police arrive on the scene, they're supposed to go ahead and call it in. They're supposed to say, Officer Smith arriving on the scene, right? And it gets noted in the logbook. He didn't do that. He broke the rules. Blame him for that. He pulls up, he sees a wreck, and he, shocker of shockers, gets out of the car to make sure everybody's okay before he calls it in. He walks up to the car. There's nobody in the car. He looks around for Maura. He can't find her. He goes up to talk to the people who called the 911 call in to see if she's at their house. She's not. He walks over to Butch Atwood's house, knocks on the door, asks if he knows who the girl is. He doesn't. Then he walks back down to his car. 10 minutes has passed, and he calls in the fact that he's arrived. And probably while he's chatting with various people, Witness A drives by and sees his car and no people. That's what happened. That's what happened.
That's very likely because here's the thing. If this accident is as bad as it seems, he's probably just worried that someone's really hurt and time is of the essence. He wants to get someone help as opposed to following the rule book. I've seen this a lot of times. Body cameras are supposed to be turned on from police officers when they, initiate a stop, but they forget to until after, they saw some blood, and then the camera, starts a few minutes later after they remember and they got over the shock of helping whoever it was and making sure the blood, the bleeding has stopped.
Exactly. Their main objective is to protect and serve, not to follow, every jot and tittle of the rule book. So the fact that he didn't immediately call it in just means he didn't immediately call it in. And this poor man, look, if you think Cecil Smith had something to do with this, you just feel free to go ahead and turn this podcast off, because nothing we're going to say are you going to like, because it is so absurd. And I'm not saying the police are never involved in nefarious actions. They are. But here, this poor guy, worst night of his life, man, if he had just had this night off, because he gets called to the scene of this accident, and for the last 15 years, he's been dealing with it. And, you know, tragic coda to this case, Cecil Smith eventually kills himself.
No.
Now, yes.
Really?
Now,
that is so
he did.
sad.
Now, he had early onset Alzheimer's, and he didn't want to deal with that. Totally understandable. But interviews with his family have talked about how this haunted him for so long, because people continually questioned whether or not he was involved in a cover-up of Maura's murder. Because frankly, most people don't even think he did it, because he couldn't have done it because he had to work the accident scene. So they've invented this other story where this other officer, who was notoriously, he was hardcore when it came to women driving recklessly, and he would always be really tough on women who drove recklessly. So their theory is, you know, Mr. Hard-ass cop decides to drive over and give Maura what for, and somehow murders her with nobody knowing, you know, or kidnaps her and murders her later with nobody knowing, and then Cecil Smith covers it up for him, because that makes sense.
Yeah,
because
right.
a police officer would do something like that with everybody watching. It's, you know, he doesn't know. For all he knows, all these people, you know, the Murats who live in the one house, we haven't talked about them, you know, and the Westmans and the Atwoods, they could all be watching the whole thing. He doesn't know. You have to believe that this police officer decided to kidnap and murder Maura Murray with everybody potentially watching him. It is so utterly absurd that I can't believe so many people have poured so much time and energy into it.
Hey, Brett, how do you really feel about that?
Yeah. I mean, just because Cecil Smith didn't call it in as soon as he arrived. No, it drives me crazy. It really does. And the collateral consequences with Cecil Smith and what he went through.
That's so sad.
It's just another testament to, this is real, guys. This is not like a Sherlock Holmes story that we all debate online about who really did it or whatever. I mean, these are real people's lives, and you got to remember that when you're accusing them of murder or covering up murder. So anyway.
Well said, Brett. No, well said. But I think that this is why we laid out those principles in our first episode, right? Is generally cops can be trusted. And I feel like there are so many theories that just jump to, it must be bad police. And if there's evidence of that, absolutely, you know, go wild. But when there is no evidence of that, just because you don't have an answer, it doesn't mean the cops did it.
And before we wrap this up for today, because we'll definitely need another episode just to go through our theories and a few of the other unusual things in this case, because I don't want to shortchange theories. I did just briefly want to run through some of the things that were in Maura's car, because I do think some of it kind of goes to the theories that various people have proposed. And you can find this online, exactly what she had in her car. It's actually kind of interesting because it reminds you of all the junk that you've got in your car. I mean, one of the things that she had in her car was an ESPN Zone card. You know, I don't even remember the last time I went to the ESPN Zone. I don't think she has a Blockbuster card. That'd probably worth something. She had a notebook for one of her classes, UMass Complete Health History Questionnaire. You know, you mentioned earlier she had those accident forms. This, once again, if Maura is running away to Canada, you know, James Renner, let's just go ahead and throw his theory out here so we can talk about this. James Renner's theory is that Maura was pregnant, that she thought Billy Roush was abusive and controlling, and for some reason, she also thought her father was abusive and controlling, and she's decided to run away and start a new life in Canada for her child, where her child could grow up away from these abusive men. It's wish casting.
And all she decided to take was all her alcohol.
Exactly. It's wish casting on the part of James Renner. He wants it to be true. He wants Maura to be alive somewhere with her child, you know, living in peace. I get that. There's no way that's actually what happened.
If I were running away to start a new life for my unborn child, I'd probably take Joseph the monkey and not bottles of alcohol.
Right. And I probably wouldn't spend the $240 I have to start this new life. I wouldn't spend any of that on Franzia wine. I would just, take it all. Anyway. So, but if you think she was doing that, once again, why does she have her UMass books? Why does she have the accident reports? Another thing people point out is based on when Maura left UMass and when the accident happened, there's about an hour of extra time that's not accounted for. Well, a couple things on that. Number one, have you ever driven anywhere where you just didn't stop? Because I haven't done that. We know she stopped for gas. I bet she stopped for food. And guess what else she did? She stopped at the DMV to pick up some accident forms. So the missing hour is not real. But also, she wouldn't have done that. She would not have picked up accident forms for her father if she's planning on running away from her father. It's nonsensical. It doesn't make any sense. The one about Maura being pregnant, they found her birth control in this car, with several pills missing. That indicates to me that she probably was on birth control. Doesn't necessarily mean she's not pregnant. She could have gotten pregnant anyway, but she took her birth control with her for a reason. But
typically, for maybe people who don't know, if you are pregnant, you usually stop taking the birth control. And right. If you, that's just truth, because even if you are trying to cause a miscarriage or something, I don't believe that's how you do it. And so there's kind of no reason to be taking birth control pills for anything if you were pregnant. So more likely she was taking them because she wasn't pregnant and was trying to avoid pregnancy.
And James Renner bases this pregnancy thing on the fact that she had Googled, how does alcohol affect pregnancies? And, how much drinking affects a child.
Okay, all I have to say is, if you've ever been a young girl, like any time where it would have been difficult to have a baby, I think every girl, whether they are sexually active or not, is terrified that they accidentally got pregnant, like from the swimming pool. And I'm kind of joking about that, but I'm not. So if you in fact do have a sexual partner and you are having sex, it is a completely normal thing for any woman to be afraid that she's pregnant.
And it just so happens that one of her assignments for her nursing class was to investigate the effects of alcohol on an unborn child. So there's you're right. We all know people who've been in that situation. There's a perfectly valid reason why she would be doing that. So, really, James Renner has a new theory that we'll talk about tomorrow, but his initial theory is and I love him. He's a great writer. And what he thinks happened, by the way, just so you know, is that she was going up there with another person. That person was driving ahead of her. She gets in the wreck. At some point, the person realizes she's not behind them anymore. They turn around, they come back. She jumps in the car and they take off. And the advantage to his theory is it explains how she could disappear so quickly, because she was expecting this person to come back. And as soon as they did, there was no conversation needed. She just jumps in and they go. Now, as Alice pointed out, if you really were running away to start a new life and you were waiting for the people to come back to pick you up, would the last thing you decided to take with you be your alcohol? Is that what it would be? She left a bra behind. I would think she'd be more likely to grab the bra than to grab the bottle of Bailey's.
Or your birth control pills.
Yeah.
Or your toothbrush.
And if you hated Billy so much and you thought he was this controlling maniac, why'd you take the monkey? Wouldn't the monkey just remind you of Billy and how much you hated Billy and how you had to leave your entire life behind because of Billy and he's a controlling jerk who's trying to kill you or something?
Oh, and she also left her deodorant behind. I would take my deodorant.
Yeah, she left her deodorant. I love this. She left a jar of Vlasic baby kosher pickles behind, and the jar was opened. I guess she was just driving around with pickles, eating pickles.
Hey, pickles are delicious.
Pickles are delicious. Yeah, pickles are delicious.
Especially if you're pregnant.
She had a bottle of Diet Cherry Coke. I'm not sure if this is the same Coke with the wine in it or not, and a package of Twizzlers. Both were opened. So maybe she was, apparently she liked to eat Twizzlers while she drank Diet Coke.
Doesn't it make it fizz? There's something about eating them together.
Yeah, I don't know. I never liked Twizzlers. Not a huge fan of licorice in general. It just wasn't my favorite thing. Yeah, she left a bottle of Victoria's Secret body lotion behind and a tube of Colgate.
She left her razor
A
behind.
Gillette razor.
Okay, ladies, we all know that if you're trying to maintain smooth legs, you have to be shaving at least probably every other day, every third day. And so if you're leaving your razor behind, you're planning on having some prickly legs or you're coming back soon.
I mean, she left a cassette tape of Led Zeppelin and a cassette tape of U2 behind. Just to give you a sense of the time. She still had cassette tape. But anyways, I mean, one reason to look at this, I think, and look at the things she left behind is people have this weird view of who Maura Murray was. And it's either, this angelic view. I mean, it seems like so many guys are obsessed with this case. And sometimes I think they're all secretly in love with Maura Murray. And so they've turned her into this angel. And then there's people who think Maura Murray is just the worst person ever, that she's a psychopath and that her disappearance is all related to her psychopathy. If you look at the items that were left behind in her car, you really do get a sense of just how normal this person was, and how she really was just like any other college student who, yes, had made some mistakes, and yes, seems like she was under incredible stress, but wasn't that remarkable, really. She wasn't evil, and she wasn't a saint. She was just a normal person. And I think it's worth remembering that.
She used Proactive.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably for acne.
Yeah. Yeah. She also, this one's interesting, a 3x5 card with directions to Burlington with exit 15 marked off of I-89. So I guess she'd also written down some directions to Burlington. But we don't even know, who knows if that was this time or not. A weird one that some people focus on is an empty cellophane pouch. And a lot of people just go directly to cigarettes with that because cigarettes come, if you've ever bought cigarettes.
Or gum.
Well, that's the thing. Exactly. Or gum. But if you're in the conspiracy and you think there was a man smoking in the passenger seat, then what you say is, that's the cellophane pouch from his cigarettes. And he left it there. And that's how we know he was really there the whole time.
Or you see that she had a package of extra chewing gum.
Or you see that she had
Maybe
a package of extra chewing gum.
She in fact had gum.
Right. Right. And there's no description beyond just empty cellophane pouch. It tells us literally nothing else about it. So.
Well, this has been fun.
This has been fun. This has been fun, as always. Like I said, we've probably spent more time on me ranting than we should have, but we still got a whole episode to go. Those of you who hate Maura Murray and hate this case, I promise you, next episode is it. We're going to do that episode and we're going to be done. We'll be moving on to something else. But I've enjoyed this, Alice. Have you had a good time?
I've loved it. I learned that a black box watches my seatbelt habits. I did not know that.
Yes. If you took nothing else away from today's episode, know that your car is watching you and judging you when you don't wear your seatbelt.
No, this has been fascinating because you guys, even though this seems like a very long discussion of Maura Murray, we're not even touching the tip of the iceberg, and so it's been fun batting it around with you, Brett.
Yeah, and I just want to remind everybody that Missing Maura Murray is on like episode 108, so don't judge us for our 4 episodes that we're spending on Maura Murray. I think we're actually being quite restrained. We could have gone through they do an entire episode on what's in her car. An entire episode just going through that list. So don't blame us.
I mean, it is a long list, but we could have summed it up for you.
Yeah. And I think we did.
A lot of things you take on a trip and a lot of junk.
And a lot of junk. A lot of junk you just leave behind. It's been a pleasure as always, Alice. I look forward to the day when we are once again together, looking into cases, breaking them down, not across town from each other, but across the table. That will be a good day. It's coming soon. I can feel it.
It's going to be a fantastic day. The birds will chirp. No holes will be in your roof. And hopefully someone's discovered a vaccine.
It's going to be amazing. That day when we get to go and go to McDonald's and go inside, it's going to be just incredible. Just sitting down and having my Big Mac instead of having to get it at the drive-thru.
I do love their dollar coffee.
I know. It's fantastic. But it's just not as good when you can't sit there and just, relax for a minute. Or like Waffle House, I miss Waffle House. I miss I miss a lot more chain restaurants.
I love Waffle House. Well, they're fantastic. By the way, for anyone out there who's looking for a fantastic but cost-efficient Valentine's Day, did you know that Waffle House does a fantastic Valentine's dinner?
I did not know that.
It's like it has a cult following. It's fantastic.
Wow.
So, and they book out. We're not getting paid by Waffle House either, by the way. But I just think that's such a good idea. They put little like carnations and candlelight, and they book out like weeks in advance. So
now you've learned 2 things today. Your car is watching you, and Waffle House is the place to be on Valentine's Day.
And that's all we have for you today, folks.
Exactly. And until next time, I'm Brett.
I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. I got a little too aggressive, maybe. With
That was really funny. That's why I joked. I was like, tell us how you really feel.
Yeah. Just, I don't know. It bothers me.
Hey, I think people want to hear the passion.
They do. And they will get the passion. I will bring the passion.
You brought the passion.
If you're looking to streamline your audio advertising buys and maximize your revenue, look no further than Triton Digital's programmatic audio advertising exchange, A2X. The private exchange consists of only licensed broadcasters and top-tier internet radio publishers, assuring the quality inventory and brand safety you can trust. Visit www.tritondigital.com to learn more.